Namaste, everybody, and welcome to this class. We began this session, this series, talking about firstly the definition of Purohit. And when we did that class, we did it because we needed to understand that when you're doing the courses in the School of Vedic Studies, many of you, many of you will, besides just getting the knowledge or understanding what the philosophy or the thinking behind it, the Vedas is, many of you would end up becoming Purohits. And in any case, the Purohit isn't confined to just somebody who performs sanskars. So then we did a detailed study of the very first mantra in the Rig Veda, which defines for us who or what a Purohit is. And there is a likeness to Agni, Agnim Ide Purohitam. So we revere the Agni, who is Purohit. So Agni is Purohit. So a Purohit would look to Agni to draw inspiration about how the Agni as Surya or Agni itself gives the heat, energy, and it is this force of energy through which the whole of the operation of this universe, the laws of creation take place. And some of the key characteristics of this creation is that the elements, made up of the elements, the breezes, the waters, the earth, the sun, and the manner in which they work, sustaining of creation, never judging, never asking for anything in return. And we said that is how we define a Purohit. Then the next talk in the series, we then touched on sanskars. And we said, look, if we are performing sanskars and we're learning about sanskars, then we needed to understand the concept of sanskar as that which goes beyond the performance of a ceremony. So the sanskar is not just confined to performing a wedding ceremony or the last rites at a funeral, but the sanskars are aimed at refining life. And I went to great length to explain to you that the meaning of sanskar is the sum meaning the total, the aggregate of impressions that form upon my very inner psyche that makes me who I am. These impressions then determine my character and personality, and the sanskars are supposed to do that. Like Sanskrit, look at this sound of Sanskrit, sanskar, meaning that which is refined, a language that is so finely tuned in its grammar, in its phonology, its linguistics, is called Sanskrit. Sanskar is a life that is refined and leads up to a purity. So having done that, I just thought today, we've looked at the sanskar. Now from the Purohit to the sanskar, let's just go in and look at what the meaning of a ritual is, because often you must remember, as part of a Western thinking, a philosophy, and a very largely Christian-based one, it was believed, that they would always differentiate between a ceremony and a ritual. And very often the ritual, would imply a kind of primitive practice, whereas ceremonies were dignified things, that people did, that more cultured people did. Of course, we'll look at the words and then we'll understand. And I always base my talks on the Sanskrit mantra or the word itself, because I feel if we understand the derivation, definition of the word itself, if we come to grips with the meaning of the word, then that itself explains a lot of things. So, Lekha, before we begin the talk on the ritual, I want to take you to your Aryan prayer. there's a page 61, if you have your Aryan prayer, right? And there's a very important mantra. Right? This mantra comes from the Rig Veda, and the last hymn of the Rig Veda is called the Sangatan Sukta. In the last hymn of the Rig Veda, we're talking about, it's amazing. The entire Rig Veda gives you all this knowledge of creation and so on, Agni, Vayu, Jal, Prithvi, all of that. And the end, it finishes off with the Sangatan Sukta, which is called the hymn of unity. And the last hymn of the Rig Veda makes this appeal that we all come together as a humanity and work as one. Common be your assembly, common be your thought, common be your journey, common be your purpose. And then the famous one, Sangachadvam, Samvadadvam, Samvomanansi Janatam. Walk together, strive together, be united in your thoughts. So before that last hymn is this hymn here. And it reads like this: Ritancha satyancha vidhat tapasodhya jayata tato ratriya jayata tatah samudro arnava. And there's three parts to it. The next part goes Samudrad arnavadadhi samvatsaro ajayata ahoratrani vidadad vishwasya mishato vashi Surya Chandra Masodhata Yatha Purvam Kalpayat Divancha Pritavinchaantarikshamatoswa. Now, the word ritual, often we use the word rites and rituals. We often use together the word rites and rituals. So look at the word rites, comes directly from the Sanskrit, from the very word that starts this mantra here, Rtyu. The very first word of this mantra says Ritancha Satyancha. Rtyu cha Satya cha. So Rtyu, spelled in English RTA or RITA, Rtyu Satya. Rtyu is indeed the Satya.
We talked about the mantras and the meanings of mantras. Yeah. But the thing is, 9 o'clock in the morning, who got time?
Somebody's complaining about listening to mantras. Right? All right. So here you are. Right. So Ritancha, Satyancha, Rtyu is Satya. Look at that. It's a very simple statement. Rtyu is indeed Satya. Rtyu, what does Rtyu then mean? And Rtyu goes on because from Rtyu we get the word rights. So look at it. What is this Satya then? That is this right. So it says at the beginning, I'm going to take the key words. Time won't allow us to go to look into detail of every word, but I'll just give you the word. There's a word they call tapasa. It says Ritancha Satyancha Vidhat Tapasa. Tapasa Adhyajayata. So it says this creation, Abhidhat, from this creation, the initial stage of creation, there was tapas. Tapas, right? T-A-P-A-S, tapas. From that we get the word tapasya. Now tapasya is, you hear of people doing austerity. We translate it into the word austerity, and austerity means a kind of discipline that one commits to evolve for the purpose of evolution. Right? A systematic progression towards a higher level of spirituality. So it says, then there was this tapasya. Like a human being practices tapasya, it gets into all kinds of postures, breathing exercise, stays awake, learns to live without food and things like that. This is the kind of intense tapasya that a human being does. Now look at it. Creation is compared to that tapasya. It says at the beginning, there was this intense austerity, tapasya. And this tapasya was that initial stage of creation. And he says, tataha, tataha means from it, or from that. Tataha, from that, ratri ajayata. From it, there was a darkness that is born. You know, today everybody is talking about dark energy or black energy, something that we all talk about creation, and there was a dark, some kind of darkness that prevailed. Nasadiya Sukta speaks about that also. Starts off, there was this unfathomable darkness at the beginning. But now in this verse, it says, even before that, there was this kind of intense energy, tapasya, this kind of dark energy. And out of that, darkness is born. So even before darkness, there is a kind of creation and intense energy, which is called tapasya. And he says, tataha, from that, ratri ajayata, that darkness was born. And then says, tataha, from that, tataha ratri, tataha samudra arnava. Right? So tataha, from that, samudra, you know, means an ocean. Now, every time it's not necessarily an ocean of water. Here we're talking about an ocean, a kind of hiranya garbha, an ocean of particles, arnavaha. Right? Samudraha arnavaha. This huge ocean, sea of particles, arnavaha. Then the next mantra says, samudrat. When it says from samudrat, it means from this ocean, arnavat. From this ocean of particles, what was born? Samvatsara ajayata. Samvatsara ajayata. Out of this ocean of particles was born samvatsara, time. The concept or notion of time then came to be. And how was that? How do we know about time? As human beings, how do we know about time? So it says, ahoratrani. Aho, aha means the day, ratri means night. Ahoratrani. So then, we were able to measure the samvatsara, the time, that time, which really we can't measure. You know, it's infinite. It's difficult to define. That time we are able to distinguish by day and night. So we count the days, the nights, and in that way, it is our attempt to understand a little bit about what time is. Because really, in essence, that is not time. It's just a change in the color of that space around us. At night, it is dark. When the sun shines, that same blackness becomes, that sky becomes a lovely blue, and we associate a rich, lovely color of the sun, and we count that. But really, it's just another form of space. So, ahoratrani, these days and nights, were the means by which we understood samvatsara, the concept of time. Then it says in the next line, it says, Surya Chandra Masaviva. And then out of that came Surya Chandra, the sun and the moon, were then subsequently born with all the various planets. And it says, Yatha Purvam Akalpayat. Yatha means as, Purvam, earlier or before, Akalpayata, it was conceived. So this conception of time, this conception of creation has happened before. And as it has happened before, now once again, it is unraveling and happening again. And then the line says, Divancha Prithavincha Antarikshamatoswa. That's a finish, that's a line, concluding line of this hymn. And Divam means day, Divas, day, Prithivim, the earth, right? Or Divas, sorry, Divas, Divaha, besides day, it means light and refers to the sky or the heavens. Prithivim, the earth, and Antariksha, Antariksha, the middle region or the atmosphere. So it says, right? The sun, the moon, and the planets, Surya, Chandra, Masaviva. Then it says, Divam, right? The heavens, Prithivim, the earth, and Antariksha, the atmosphere. All of these then came to be. So the first rite, R-I-T-E, according to the Vedas, because the word rite, R-I-T-E, comes from Rita, and I'll show you now why. I'll further confirm that with another word, ritual, and how we get the word rite and ritual. Look at it. Please be conscious of the spelling. R-I-T-E, rite, R-I-T-U-A-L, ritual, and we'll go on to that rite and how that rite becomes ritual. And the Sanskrit Rita, and we'll touch now on Rtyu. Right? So firstly, but you've got to understand, can you see the rite? The rites then, when you do rites and you perform a havan, and you talk of Surya, Jyoti, and we talk of Antariksha, we mention these words over and over again. So if we are performing the yajna, and I've said this on several occasions, it mustn't be a mechanical process of just offering samagri and ghee, but a little moment to contemplate that yajna as a rite comes from Rita. It is the Satya, that law of truth, the law of the universe that is in operation. And the yajna is a simple attempt to understand that process of creation and how we fit into that creation. So, as I said, this is both the adhyatmic, well, all three meanings, adhyatmic, adibhautik, adidevi. Adhyatmic has to do with Atma, the spiritual meaning of how this creation, as it evolves, there is an evolution that is taking place in my spirituality. Otherwise, life becomes meaningless. Right? And then you see all the elements evolving, the earth, the waters becoming, various forms of rivers, etc. The earth becoming the mountains, the stones, the sand in its various forms. And all of these then constitute a creation, and we see that creation evolving slowly. Now, then it says, right, there's this, we've looked at in this verse, in this hymn, we've looked at creation in its very primordial state. Right? When there's nothing, not even darkness, a stage that goes beyond even darkness. Now it says, as this manifest and we see it, then we have the day and the night. When we look at the day and the night, we differentiate and we are able to measure time. Then what is the next thing that we see? With the days and nights, there's the weeks, the months, and the year. And then what do we look at the year? When we look at the year, how do we divide the year? We divide the year, the months of the year, how? Into seasons. We divide it into seasons, and the word for season in Sanskrit is Rtyu, R-I-T-U, Rtyu. That Rtyu then, that Rtyu is the word, the Sanskrit word from which we get the word ritual, R-I-T-U-A-L. So the ritual then is just like Rita, the rite, the ritual. Here, the ritual is about understanding the seasons, the spring, the summer, the autumn, and the winter. So now, what has that to do with us and the performance of the yajna, the seasons, the Rtyu, the seasons? So simply, the Vedas say that like the sun rises, and that marks the birth of a new day. Each sunrise, each dawn is a resurrection. It's a rebirth. Everything comes to life again. So that is birth and represents the spring of life. As you grow into the day, it becomes a summer. When we are, in the blossom of our life, from youth, we reach that stage where we marry. Look at it, time doesn't allow. But can you see your ashramas also playing out? The first ashram, the second ashram, the third ashram of Vanapras and Sannyas. Slowly, this sun and its journey through the horizon, from the time it rises till it sets, depicts one day of life. It depicts the seasons of the year. It depicts the seasons of life, and it depicts the seasons of creation. Creation like that is born, it grows, it reaches its zenith, its climax. Everything blooms and blossoms. A couple marries, they have children, they celebrate life, and then slowly the sun begins to set. As the sun sets, we enter the dusk of our life, the twilight of our lives, and finally we enter the night or the darkness that resembles sleep and death. And for sure, as there is the darkness of the night, there is the light of the dawn that follows. Meaning that darkness is simply a transition from your sleep, from that state of death, to a new life, to a new birth. So therefore, when we believe in reincarnation, it's just because you are Hindus and you believe in it, and as against somebody else that believes in going to heaven and hell, got nothing to do with that. The Vedas are simply saying to us, this is the cycle of life, of birth, of death, and of creation, and we go through it as nature shows us, as we see this mastery and grandeur of nature at work, just like that we go through it. We have to go through it. That is the law of nature. That is Rita, that is Rtyu. So each season is a progression. Okay. So people, you need to understand that when we do a ritual, a so-called ritual, the ritual is a physical act, the Adi Bhautik act of lighting a fire and making offerings of ghee and samagri into it and chanting mantra. The deeper meaning is that Rtyu ritual. That ritual is symbolic of Rtyu, the seasons and cycles of creation, of life, of a day in our lives, and our whole journey of life. A single day in a day of creation, and a day that represents the very moment of creation till the dissolution of that creation. Then when we're looking at it, why? Let's look at the final part, and that is the relation to the Havan itself. When you light your yajna, your fire, what happens? We use the words Agni and Surya repeatedly. That is because the yajna is saying to us that when you are lighting that fire, you haven't created Agni. We do not create Agni. By putting the wood, the ghee, the samagri, and all of that, lighting the camphor, what we are doing is we are allowing Agni to take a physical form that we can see. I repeat that. We are allowing Agni to take or to manifest itself in a physical form where we can see that Agni in the form of flames. There's Agni around us all the time. A temperature, thermometer will prove to you that there is Agni around us. When there's less Agni, then we say it's cold. But Agni is there all the time. That Agni we see in the form of, the burning coal, the lava that flows molten from a volcano. And we also see in the form of Jyoti, that subtle light, the fluid lightning. All of this is Agni. Right? And that Agni is that essence of energy. Agni is that essence of energy, which is the source and the very basis of creation. When we light this fire, Agni takes a form. And when the wood dies out, Agni doesn't die. When the wood perishes, the Agni has gone back into its form of heat, subtle heat that we can feel and we can't see. Just like when you put the switch on, the bulb comes on. All that bulb proves to us when it comes on is that current has been running in that line all the time. That current has been there. When you put the switch on, the bulb comes on and we can see that current in the physical form, well, not really physical, it isn't physical, but in that gaseous form of that light that fills the room, proves to us that that current is running there. If there were no current, there would be no light. If there were no water in the heavens, there will be no clouds. The clouds prove to us that the water is always there. When condensation and all of that we study in science happens, then that water takes a form of a cloud that we can see. The water is there in subtle form all the time. So I will conclude there, and I hope you understand the ritual then represents this cycle of life. And like Agni, our bodies are merely a physical manifestation of a deeper, a spiritual consciousness that exists, and that becomes manifest as a body. And don't forget that line, Vyakta, Adi, Vyakta, Madhya, Avyakta, and then Vyakta. Everything is Avyakta, unmanifest. It becomes a Vyakta, manifest, and then unmanifest again. And this is the cycle of creation. Becoming visible, assuming a form, becoming formless, subtle, and then again assuming a form. This is the cycle of creation. The Rtyu represents the seasons, the ritual, the rites then embody this idea of the manifest and the unmanifest. Okay, namaste. Thank you.
Namaste, Dr. G. Very interesting.
Lekha, that would have allowed for your recording to end. Yeah, so any comments or anything before we conclude? We have about a minute more.